The dining room smelled of roasted turkey and cinnamon-spiced pie, the kind of warmth that should have wrapped the house in comfort. Eleanor sat at the head of the table, her hands folded neatly in her lap, the lines on her face tracing a lifetime of quiet sacrifices. At 78, she still carried herself with a grace that belied her age. Her silver hair pinned back, her eyes sharp despite the weight they held. The table was set for six: her son Michael, his wife Laura, their two teenage children, and her daughter Sarah, who was driving in from the city. It was Thanksgiving, the one day each year Eleanor allowed herself to hope for something resembling family. The house was old, its wooden floors creaking under the weight of memories. Eleanor had lived here for 50 years, raising Michael and Sarah through scraped knees, late-night fevers, and dreams too big for their small town. She'd been a seamstress, a teacher, a gardener, whatever it took to keep the lights on after their father left. She never spoke of the struggle, only of the love. But tonight, as the candles flickered and the clock ticked past 7, that love felt like a fragile thing, teetering on the edge of something she couldn't name. Michael arrived first, his SUV crunching the gravel outside. Eleanor heard the car doors slam, the muffled voices of her grandchildren, Emma and Lucas, arguing over something trivial. She smiled faintly, pushing herself up from the chair, her knees protesting. She opened the door, and there was Michael, 45, broad-shouldered, his hair thinning at the crown. His face was tight, distracted, as if he'd rather be anywhere else. "Mom," he said, brushing past her with a quick peck on the cheek. Traffic was a nightmare. Laura's got a headache, so she's staying in the car for a bit. Eleanor nodded, swallowing the sting. "That's fine. Come in. Warm up. I made your favorite stuffing." Emma and Lucas shuffled in behind him, their eyes glued to their phones. "Hi, Grandma," Emma mumbled, barely looking up. Lucas gave a half-hearted wave. Eleanor's heart ached at their indifference, but she brushed it aside. They were teenagers, she told herself. They'd come around. The table was a work of art: linen napkins, her mother's china, a centerpiece of pine cones and autumn leaves she'd gathered herself. She'd spent days preparing, her hands trembling with the effort of peeling potatoes and kneading dough. This was her gift to them, her way of holding the family together, even as it seemed to slip through her fingers. Sarah arrived an hour later, her laughter filling the house like a burst of sunlight. At 38, she was unmarried, childless, and fiercely independent, her dark hair pulled into a messy bun. She hugged Eleanor tightly, whispering, "You outdid yourself, Mom. This looks amazing." Eleanor's eyes stung, but she smiled. "Just wait till you taste the pie." Dinner began with the usual clatter of plates and small talk. Sarah kept the conversation alive, asking Emma about school and Lucas about his soccer team. Michael was quieter, his fork scraping against the plate as he checked his phone under the table. Eleanor watched him, her heart heavy. He'd always been her dreamer, the boy who wanted to build skyscrapers and travel the world. Now he was a middle manager at an insurance firm, married to a woman who rarely smiled, and carrying a bitterness Eleanor couldn't understand. It was during dessert that it happened. The pie was half-eaten, the whipped cream melting into golden pools. Sarah was telling a story about a client at her law firm when Michael set his fork down with a clink that silenced the room. His eyes were hard, fixed on Eleanor. "Mom," he said, his voice low but sharp, "we need to talk about this house." Eleanor blinked, caught off guard. "What about it?" "It's too much for you," The upkeep. The taxes, it's a burden. You're a burden. The words landed like a slap. Cold and deliberate. Emma and Lucas froze, their eyes darting to their plates. Sarah's mouth fell open, but Michael pressed on. You can't keep living here alone. It's not safe. And frankly, it's selfish. We're all busy. Mom. We can't keep checking in on you. The room was suffocatingly silent. Eleanor's hands trembled in her lap, but she kept her face composed, her voice steady. I manage just fine. Michael. This is my home. Your home. He laughed. A bitter sound. It's a money pit. You're sitting on a fortune with this land, and you're too stubborn to see it. Sell it. Move to a facility. It's time. Sarah's voice cut through, sharp as a blade. Michael, that's enough. You don't get to talk to her like that. He turned on her, his face flushed. Oh, please. Sarah. You're not here cleaning up her messes or paying her bills. You don't get it. Eleanor's heart pounded, but she said nothing. She looked at Michael, searching for the boy who used to cling to her skirts, the boy who promised he'd never leave her. But that boy was gone, replaced by this man who saw her as a problem to be solved. The rest of the meal passed in a blur. Michael left early, muttering about work. Emma and Lucas followed, their goodbyes perfunctory. Sarah stayed to help clean up, her anger simmering as she scrubbed dishes. He's out of line. Mom, she said. You don't deserve that. Eleanor only nodded, her thoughts elsewhere. Michael's words echoed in her mind, just a burden. He didn't know. He couldn't know. For years, she'd kept a secret, one that could change everything. In the attic, hidden beneath a loose floorboard, was a deed to a trust of fortune she'd built quietly, meticulously, through decades of careful investments. It wasn't just money. It was her legacy, her way of ensuring her children would never know the poverty she'd endured. But Michael's words had cracked something open in her. She'd always planned to reveal the fortune when the time was right, to give her children a gift they'd never expect. Now, she wasn't so sure. If her own son saw her as a burden, what would he do with her secret? Would he even care? As Sarah kissed her goodbye and promised to call, Eleanor stood alone in the quiet house. The candles had burned low, their flames flickering in the draft. She climbed the stairs to the attic, her steps slow but deliberate. Kneeling by the floorboard, she lifted it and pulled out the leather-bound folder that held her life's work. The numbers stared back at her millions, more than Michael could ever imagine. She traced her fingers over the pages, her heart heavy with a question she'd never dared to ask. Was it worth it? Eleanor sat in the attic, the folder open in her lap, the dim light of a single bulb casting shadows across the room. The air was thick with the scent of old wood and dust. But to her, it was the smell of memory. This was where she'd hidden her dreams, her fears, and now, her secret fortune. She hadn't always been wealthy. In fact, for most of her life, she'd scraped by, sewing dresses late into the night, teaching summer school, and selling vegetables from her garden to make ends meet. Every extra penny had gone into a small investment account, started with a modest inheritance from her mother. Over decades, through patience and a knack for numbers she'd never boasted about, it had grown into something extraordinary. She closed the folder and pressed it to her chest, her thoughts drifting to Michael. His words from Thanksgiving still burned, just a burden. She'd raised him to be better than that, hadn't she? She remembered the nights she'd stayed up with him, soothing his nightmares, promising him the world. She'd worked herself to the bone to give him a chance at a life she'd never had. And yet, here he was, reducing her to a problem, a weight on his shoulders. The next morning, Eleanor woke with a resolve she hadn't felt in years. She wasn't ready to tell Michael about the fortune yet, but she couldn't let his words define her. She called Sarah, her voice steady as she asked for a favor. "I need your help with something," she said. "Can you come by this weekend?" Sarah arrived on Saturday, her eyes bright with curiosity. "What's this about, Mom?" she asked, settling into the kitchen with a mug of tea. The morning light streamed through the window, catching the steam in a soft glow. Eleanor hesitated, then slid the folder across the table. "This is something I've kept to myself for a long time," she said. "I want you to know about it. Not Michael, not yet. Just you." Sarah's brow furrowed as she opened the folder. Her eyes widened as she scanned the documents, the numbers leaping off the page. "Mom, how did you do this?" Eleanor smiled faintly. "A little at a time. Your grandmother left me a small sum when I was young. I invested it, learned as I went. I wanted to make sure you and Michael would always be taken care of." Sarah shook her head, her voice trembling. "This is millions. Mom, why didn't you tell us?" "I wanted to wait until the right moment," Eleanor said, her gaze distant. "I thought it would bring us closer." But after Thanksgiving, she trailed off, the memory of Michael's words tightening her chest. Sarah reached for her hand. "He was wrong. Mom, you're not a burden. You're the strongest person I know." Eleanor squeezed her daughter's hand, grateful for the warmth. But the hurt lingered, a quiet ache that wouldn't fade. She decided then that she needed to understand Michael, to see what had changed in him. She asked Sarah to keep the secret for now, and together, they began to plan. Eleanor wanted to visit Michael's home, to see his life through his eyes. Maybe then she could find the boy she'd lost. The following weekend, Eleanor drove the 2 hours to Michael's suburban neighborhood. The house was modern, all sharp angles and glass, a stark contrast to her cozy, weathered home. She knocked, her heart pounding. Laura answered, her expression polite but distant. "Eleanor, what a surprise," she said, stepping aside. "Michael's in the garage." Eleanor found him tinkering with an old lawnmower, his face etched with frustration. "Mom," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "What are you doing here?" "I wanted to see you," she said simply. "To talk." He sighed, tossing the rag aside. "If this is about Thanksgiving, I said what I needed to say. You can't keep living in that house. It's too much." Eleanor studied him, searching for a crack in his armor. "Tell me what's going on. Michael, why do you feel this way?" For a moment, he looked like he might brush her off. But then his shoulders sagged, and he leaned against the workbench. "It's everything, Mom. Work's a grind. Laura's stressed. The kids need things: college, cars, stuff we can't afford. And then there's you, in that big house, refusing to move. I worry about you, but I can't keep up." Eleanor's heart softened, but the sting of his words remained. He saw her as a liability, not a person with her own strength, her own story. She wanted to tell him about the fortune then, to ease his burden. But something held her back. She needed to know if his heart could change without the promise of money. Over the next few weeks, Eleanor began to act. She invited Michael and his family to dinner again, this time keeping it simple: soup and bread. No grand gestures. She listened as he talked about his job, his worries, his fears for the future. She saw the weight he carried, the way it had hardened him. But she also saw glimpses of the boy he'd been: kind, curious, full of dreams. One evening, as they sat on her porch, the air crisp with the promise of winter, Eleanor took a chance. "Michael," she said, her voice soft but firm, "do you remember when you were little? And you'd tell me you'd build me a house one day?" He looked at her, surprised. "Yeah. I wanted it to have a big porch, like this one." She nodded, her eyes glistening. "You're still my son, you know, and I'm still your mother. I'm not a burden. I'm here, and I have more to give than you realize." He didn't respond, but she saw something shift in his eyes, a flicker of doubt, maybe even guilt. It wasn't enough. Not yet. But it was a start. Winter settled over the town, blanketing Eleanor's house in a quiet hush. She spent her days tending to small tasks: mending curtains, pruning her rose bushes, writing letters she never sent. The folder in the attic remained untouched, but its presence weighed on her. She'd shown it to Sarah, and that had been a relief. But Michael was still a question mark. She wanted to believe he could change, that he could see her as more than an obligation. But doubt gnawed at her, as persistent as the cold seeping through the windows. Sarah visited often, bringing coffee and stories from the city. She urged Eleanor to confront Michael, to lay the truth bare. "He needs to know, Mom," she said one afternoon, her breath visible in the chilly air. "Not just about the money, but about you. He's forgotten who you are." Eleanor shook her head. "I want him to see me first, without the money. If I tell him now, it'll change everything for the wrong reasons." Sarah sighed but didn't push. She knew her mother's stubbornness, the quiet strength that had carried her through decades of hardship. Instead, she suggested a plan: a family gathering. Not at Eleanor's house, but somewhere neutral. A chance to rebuild what had been broken. They chose a cabin by Lake Willow, a place the family had visited when Michael and Sarah were children. Eleanor remembered those summers: Michael splashing in the water, Sarah chasing fireflies, their laughter echoing through the trees. Maybe, she thought, the memories could soften Michael's edges. The gathering was set for mid-December, a weekend escape from the grind of daily life. Eleanor arrived early, her car packed with blankets and homemade cookies. The cabin smelled of pine and possibility, its walls lined with faded photos of happier times. She set the table with care, her hands steady despite the ache in her joints. This wasn't about proving anything, she told herself. It was about remembering. Michael and his family arrived late, their SUV kicking up snow as it pulled into the drive. Laura was bundled in a scarf, her face pale but less guarded than usual. Emma and Lucas trudged in, their phones tucked away for once, perhaps sensing the importance of the moment. Sarah was already there, stoking the fire, her smile a beacon in the dim light. The first evening was tentative, the conversation stilted. Michael sat on the edge of the couch, his arms crossed, as if bracing for another argument. But Eleanor didn't push. She served hot cocoa, passed around cookies, and let the fire do the talking. Slowly, the room warmed not just from the flames, but from the stories that began to spill out. Sarah talked about the time Michael got stuck in a tree, trying to rescue a kite. Emma laughed, surprising everyone, and added her own memory of a camping trip gone wrong. Michael stayed quiet, But Eleanor caught him watching her, his expression unreadable. Later, as the others slept, they sat by the fire, the crackling logs the only sound. "This place hasn't changed," he said finally, his voice soft. "Some things don't," Eleanor replied. "Some things shouldn't." He looked at her, and for the first time in months, she saw a flicker of the boy she'd raised. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said, almost too quiet to hear. "About Thanksgiving. I was stressed. I didn't mean it." Eleanor's throat tightened, but she kept her voice steady. "I know you're carrying a lot, Michael, but I'm not one of your burdens. I never was." He nodded, his eyes fixed on the fire. I worry about you. The house. The future. I don't know how to fix it." "You don't have to fix me," she said. "Just see me." The rest of the weekend was a slow thawing. Michael helped chop wood, his movements deliberate, as if rediscovering a rhythm he'd forgotten. Emma and Lucas played cards with Eleanor, their laughter filling the cabin. Laura even joined in, her smile hesitant but genuine. Eleanor watched it all, her heart a mix of hope and caution. She wanted to believe this was a turning point, but she'd been hurt before. On the last day, as they packed to leave, Michael pulled her aside. "Mom, I've been thinking," he said. "Maybe we could fix up the house together. Make it easier for you. I don't want you to feel alone." It wasn't everything, but it was enough for now. Eleanor smiled, her hand resting on his arm. "I'd like that," she said. But in her mind, the folder in the attic loomed large. She wasn't ready to share it yet. She needed to know if Michael's change of heart was real, or if it was just the warmth of the cabin talking. As they drove away, Eleanor stood on the porch, the lake shimmering behind her. The cold bit at her fingers, but she felt alive, purposeful. She'd spent her life giving her time, her love, her dreams. Now, she was ready to decide how to give her final gift. And to whom? Spring came slowly, the frost giving way to tentative buds on Eleanor's rose bushes. She spent her mornings in the garden, her hands in the soil, finding solace in the rhythm of growth. Michael's apology at the cabin had lingered, a fragile bridge between them. But she was cautious. Words were easy. Actions were harder. He'd promised to help with the house, and she was waiting to see if he'd follow through. Sarah kept her updated. Her call's a lifeline. "He's talking about you differently," she said one evening, her voice crackling over the phone. "Like he's starting to get it. Give him time, Mom." Eleanor nodded, though Sarah couldn't see. Time was something she had, but not endlessly. At 78, every season felt like a gift and a warning. She wanted to believe in Michael, but she also wanted to protect herself and her secret. Michael came by in early April, his toolbox clanking in the back of his SUV. "Thought I'd start with the porch," he said, his tone lighter than it had been in months. "The railing's loose, and I know you love sitting out here." Eleanor watched him work, his hands steady as he replaced rotten boards and tightened screws. It was the first time in years she'd seen him do something without complaint, without the weight of resentment. She brought him lemonade, the glass sweating in the spring sun, and they sat together, the silence comfortable. "You didn't have to do this," she said, her voice soft. He shrugged, wiping his brow. "I wanted to. I meant what I said at the cabin. Mom, I'm trying." She studied him, searching for sincerity. His eyes met hers, and for a moment, She saw the boy who'd promised her a house with a big porch. Her heart softened, but she wasn't ready to let go of her guard. Not yet. Over the next few weeks, Michael became a regular visitor. He fixed the leaky faucet in the kitchen, painted the guest room, even helped her plant new roses. Laura came once, her presence awkward but polite, and Emma and Lucas tagged along, their phones forgotten as they dug in the dirt with their grandmother. Eleanor felt the family knitting back together, stitch by careful stitch. But there were moments that gave her pause. One afternoon, as they worked in the garden, Michael mentioned selling the house again, not with the same anger as before, but with a practical edge. "You could get a lot for this place, Mom," he said, wiping dirt from his hands. "Enough to live comfortably, anywhere you want." Eleanor's stomach tightened. "This is where I want to live," she said, her voice firm. "This is home." He didn't push, but the comment lingered, a reminder of his words at Thanksgiving. She wondered if his help was genuine, or if it was a way to ease his guilt, or worse, a step toward convincing her to sell. That night, she climbed to the attic again, the folder heavy in her hands. She'd built this fortune for her children, but now she questioned what it meant. Would it heal the rift with Michael, or widen it? Would it make him see her, or only the money? She thought of Sarah, who'd known about the fortune and loved her no less. But Michael was different. His heart tangled in ways she didn't fully understand. She decided to test him not with the truth, but with something smaller. She called him the next day, her voice casual. "Michael, I've been thinking about the future," she said. "I'm putting together a will. I'd like your input." He arrived the following weekend, his expression a mix of curiosity and unease. They sat at the kitchen table, a pot of tea between them. Eleanor handed him a draft of a will, not the real one, but a carefully crafted version. It outlined modest bequests, the house to Sarah, some savings to Emma and Lucas for college, a small sum for Michael and Laura. Nothing about the fortune. Michael read it, his brow furrowing. "This is it?" he asked, his tone sharper than she'd expected. "Mom, you've got this whole place. The land alone is worth a fortune." Eleanor's heart sank, but she kept her face neutral. "It's what I've planned," she said. "I want to keep things simple." He leaned back, his jaw tight. "Simple? Mom, you're sitting on a gold mine. You could do so much more for yourself. For us." There it was, the same edge she'd heard at Thanksgiving. She wanted to shake him, to tell him about the millions hidden upstairs, to see if it would change him. But she held back. "What I have is enough," she said. "I just want to know you're here for me, not for what I might leave behind." He looked away, his silence heavy. When he left, Eleanor felt a mix of disappointment and determination. She wasn't ready to give up on him, but she knew she had to protect her legacy and herself. Summer arrived, painting Eleanor's garden in vibrant hues of red and gold. The roses were in full bloom, their scent mingling with the warmth of the sun. She spent her days tending to them, her hands steady despite the questions swirling in her mind. Michael's reaction to the will had shaken her, but it hadn't broken her resolve. She wanted to believe he could change, that he could see her as more than a means to an end. But she needed to be sure. Sarah came by often, her presence a balm. They talked about the fortune, about what it could do not just for the family, but for others. Sarah had ideas, scholarships for local kids, a community garden, a fund for single mothers like Eleanor had been. "You've got a chance to leave a legacy, Mom," she said. her eyes bright. Not just for us, but for the world. Eleanor nodded, the ideas sparking something in her. She'd spent her life giving quietly, but maybe it was time to think bigger. Still, she couldn't shake the question of Michael. She wanted him to be part of this, but only if he could see her for who she was. In July, she invited the family for a barbecue. It was a risk, bringing them together again after the tension of the past months. But she wanted to try, to see if the summer light could soften the edges of their fractured bond. Michael arrived with Laura and the kids, his smile tentative but genuine. Emma and Lucas ran to the backyard, their laughter a rare gift. Laura helped with the salads, her movements less guarded than before. As they ate, Eleanor watched Michael. He was quieter than usual, but there was a warmth in his eyes she hadn't seen in years. After dinner, as the sun dipped below the horizon, he joined her on the porch. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began, his voice low. "About the will. About everything. I was wrong to push you about the house." Eleanor's heart lifted, but she stayed silent, letting him speak. "I've been so caught up in my own problems," he continued. "I forgot what you've done for us. For me. I don't want you to think I'm here for anything else." She studied him, searching for the truth. "I just want my son back," she said softly. "The one who used to sit on this porch with me and dream." He nodded, his eyes glistening. "I'm trying, Mom. I promise." It wasn't a grand declaration, but it was enough to give her hope. Over the next few weeks, Michael's visits became more frequent. He brought the kids to help in the garden, stayed for long conversations over coffee. Laura opened up, sharing stories of her own childhood, her own struggles. Eleanor saw the family she'd always wanted, slowly coming back together. But the fortune remained a secret, a weight she carried alone. She began to work with Sarah on a plan not just for the money, but for its purpose. They met with a lawyer, drafted documents for a trust that would fund community projects, education, and support for those in need. Eleanor felt a sense of purpose she hadn't known in years, a way to give back that felt true to her life. One evening, as she and Michael sat in the garden, the air thick with the scent of roses, she decided it was time. Not to tell him everything, but to take a step. "Michael," she said, her voice steady, "there's something I need to share with you. Not now, but soon. I need you to trust me." He looked at her, his expression open, curious. "Okay, Mom. Whatever it is, I'm here." It was a small moment, but it felt monumental. For the first time, Eleanor believed he might be ready not for the money, but for her. She smiled, the weight of the secret lifting just a little. The roses swayed in the breeze, their petals catching the last light of the day, and Eleanor felt a quiet peace settle over her. Fall returned, the leaves turning crimson and gold, mirroring the colors of Eleanor's garden. She stood at her kitchen window, watching the world shift, her heart fuller than it had been in years. Michael's efforts had continued through the summer, his presence steady, his actions thoughtful. He'd fixed the roof, helped with the harvest, even brought Emma and Lucas to spend a weekend learning her recipes. Laura had softened, too, her smiles more frequent, her conversations warmer. Eleanor felt the family knitting together. Not perfectly, but enough to believe in possibility. The folder in the attic was no longer a secret from Sarah, and together, they'd finalized the trust. It would fund scholarships, a community center, and a program for single parents causes close to Eleanor's heart. But Michael still didn't know. She'd waited, watching him, testing his heart. Now, as Thanksgiving approached again, she knew it was time. She invited the family for dinner. Not at her house, but at Sarah's apartment in the city. It was neutral ground, a place where the past wouldn't loom so large. The table was smaller, the setting simpler, but the warmth was the same. Eleanor brought her pie, the recipe unchanged, a symbol of continuity. Michael arrived with a bottle of wine, his smile easy. Laura hugged her, a rare gesture. Emma and Lucas set the table, their chatter filling the room. As they ate, Eleanor felt a quiet joy. The conversation flowed, the laughter genuine. Michael caught her eye, raising his glass. "To Mom," he said, his voice steady. "For always holding us together." The table fell silent, all eyes on her. Eleanor's throat tightened, but she smiled. "To family," she said, her voice soft but clear. After dinner, as the others cleared the table, Eleanor pulled Michael aside. "There's something I need to tell you," she said, her heart pounding. They stepped onto Sarah's balcony, the city lights sparkling below. She took a breath, then began. "Last Thanksgiving, you called me a burden," she said, her voice steady. "It hurt, Michael, more than you know. But it also made me think about what I've built, what I want to leave behind." He started to speak, but she held up a hand. "Let me finish. I've spent my life working for you and Sarah, saving every penny, investing it. There's a fortune, millions, hidden away. I didn't tell you because I needed to know you saw me, not just what I could give you." Michael's eyes widened, his breath catching. "Mom, I had no idea." "I know," she said, her gaze steady. "I'm telling you now because I believe in you again. The trust is for you, for Sarah, for Emma and Lucas. But it's also for others, for scholarships, for people who need a chance, like I did." He stood silent, his face a mix of shock and shame. "I'm so sorry, Mom," he said finally. "For everything. I didn't know what you'd done for us." She reached for his hand, her touch gentle but firm. "I don't need you to be sorry. I need you to be my son." He nodded, tears in his eyes. "I will, Mom. I promise." They returned to the table, the moment private but profound. Eleanor felt a weight lift, the secret no longer a burden. As they ate pie, laughed, and shared stories, she saw her family not perfect, but hers. The fortune was no longer just money. It was a bridge, a legacy of love and resilience. Later, as she drove home, the stars bright above, Eleanor thought of the years ahead. She'd given her children a gift, not just of wealth, but of understanding. She'd shown them who she was: a mother, a survivor, a woman with a secret worth more than gold. And in their eyes, she saw the reflection of a family reborn.